Again, welcome everyone. It seems like we're hearing a lot about artificial intelligence these days. Well, to be honest, I've kind of been ignoring all this, I suppose, but I decided that maybe I should give it some attention. I begin to wonder, is artificial intelligence something that is good? Is it bad, or maybe something in between? Does artificial intelligence, or AI for short, have an effect on a person's religious beliefs? Does AI even exist? Today I'd like to look at the rise, if you will, of artificial intelligence and its possible effects on God's people as well as general society. Now, to begin with, does artificial intelligence even exist? Well, the answer to me is no. Computing devices are only capable of performing mathematical operations on numbers. That's really all they can do. Using other numbers, they can be programmed to perform mathematical operations on the other numbers. For example, if you're editing a digital photograph, that photo is made up of individual dots or picture elements, also known as pixels. The color and brightness of each pixel is represented by numbers. Now, altering these numbers can change the photo to make it brighter, change the color, or make a host of other alterations to the picture. But computers operate on data that is input that is given to them. They perform operations on this data and then they produce an output. So really, computers do basically three things. That's it. They're fed input. Now, that might be from a keyboard, a microphone, or a camera. Really anything that can be digitized or converted into a series of ones or zeros. Then a program that is running on the computer manipulates the data per its instructions given to it by its human programmers. It does what it's told to do. Lastly, the computer takes the results of running that program and outputs those results. Now, that might be an output displayed on a monitor, or it might be from a printer. The output might control a thermostat or operate an industrial robot, possibly drive a car. But that's what computers do. We feed them input, they perform calculations on the incoming data based on a program or a predefined set of instructions, and then send the output to a device that hopefully benefits us humans. That might sound rather simple, and actually it is in principle. Now, there are things that a computer can do better than humans. One thing is accurately remember things. Computers can store information and recall it exactly as it was. Humans sometimes forget things, or when they do remember them, they may not remember them quite accurately, maybe not all the details. And computers can reliably store data for indefinite periods, and that's pretty handy. If a computer is programmed to perform a certain task and it works correctly, it'll do the same thing every time. In that respect, computers are not prone to make the occasional mistakes the way humans do. Sometimes we just make a mistake randomly. Of course, computers don't make mistakes, assuming that the humans that programmed the computers did it right. And sometimes that's a very big if. We know about that. Now, computers can process data for us much faster than we can do things by hand, and that makes them great tools. They're able to do much work and do so very quickly, and that frees up humans to do other things. Once a computer is paid for, it requires no salary or benefits, just maybe some occasional maintenance and a tiny amount of electricity. So how fast are computers? Well, for perspective, one of the first computers was named ENIAC, and it processed at about 500 flops. You may be wondering what a flop is. A flop is short for floating point calculations per second. So we might say that ENIAC could make 500 calculations every single second. Now, humans would find that difficult to do. Humans would have trouble making over one calculation per second if you're using, a piece of paper and a pencil, if that. So the first computers, they performed mostly simple math like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But they could do this so much faster than humans that they became very popular, especially in business. But really, 500 calculations per second is nowhere near fast enough to output audio and video like we do today. So as time progressed, computers became faster and faster. Now, for example, I use an iPad tablet, which is a computer basically, to help us produce our service each week. Remember that the original ENIAC computer could perform 500 operations per second. How many operations per second can my little iPad perform? What I'm using right now. Any idea? 1,000? How about 1 billion operations per second? Can we imagine that? That's not the answer. The answer is actually 15.8 trillion operations every second. That's just a little tablet. Talk about complex programs and speed. What about the exascale Frontier computer system at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee? Now, this is actually considered to be a supercomputer. But how many operations can it perform in just 1 second? Any idea? Wild guess? Well, it can perform just over 1 quintillion operations per second. Now, we can't remember just how much 1 quintillion is from school. We could also say it can perform 1 billion trillion operations every second. It's difficult to comprehend just how fast and how powerful modern computing devices have become. Even our smartphones have great processing power today. It's really unbelievable. The human mind just can't comprehend computing speeds that fast. So the important point I'm trying to make here is that computers can process data at incredible speeds today, and therein lies their great power. However, they still work basically the same way that very first computer did. It's just that they can run much longer and much more sophisticated programs, and of course do so at blazing speed. But is there any intelligence in the original ENIAC, or even today's modern computers, in these machines? Well, in my opinion, these machines are just that, machines. They can only operate on the input we give them, and then only by following the instructions given to them by their human programmers. They can do nothing else. They have no free will. They have no real intelligence, artificial or otherwise, and they never will. At least not by my definition of intelligence. Excuse me. But that's what I think. But I decided to get another opinion. So I decided to ask AI itself. Okay. So I asked Microsoft Copilot if AI was really intelligent. By the way, if you don't know, Microsoft Copilot is AI. Well, here was its answer. Here's what Microsoft said when I asked it if AI, including itself, was actually intelligent. Quote, "While AI can perform tasks that appear intelligent and can significantly aid humans in various fields, it does not possess consciousness, self-awareness, or the broad understanding and reasoning capabilities of a human being. AI's intelligence is limited to the data it has been trained on and the specific functions it has been designed to perform. In short, AI is really intelligent within the scope of its programming and data, but it is not intelligent in the same way humans are. If you have more questions or need further details, feel free to ask." End quote. So I suppose it really depends on our definition of intelligence. That's where it comes down to. So computers, even using what some call AI today, can only make decisions based on their programming and the data that they're given. Now, for example, there's my 10-year-old car, okay? Now, some of you might know that I keep up with the weather. I'm kind of a weather person. The other day I was driving down the road when I received a warning from my car on the dash about potential ice on the roadways. Be careful, watch for ice. And one could argue that my car was using AI to protect me from danger. But the air temperature, according to the car, was 38 degrees and had been for some time when I got the warning. The road temperature was in the mid-40s, so there's really no chance I would be seeing any ice. But my car was not really intelligent enough to really understand the overall situation, but that's okay. No big deal. My car also has a collision avoidance system. If I'm approaching a large obstacle in the road or maybe closing on a slower vehicle in front of me too quickly, an audible alarm goes off, Red LEDs reflect off my windshield, turning my windshield red. Look out! I'm warned. Now, while this feature does work most of the time, I suppose it's a good idea, it often gives me random false positives. Very often I'm just driving down the road on one of our old country roads without a vehicle in sight, and the alarm sounds. This happens in random places where I can see nothing that should cause the alarm to go off. No animals are crossing the road, no birds flying around, nothing I can see. But remember, any computer is only as good as its programming and its data. My car has many safety features designed to protect human lives. That's a good thing. However, my car also has a constant habit of randomly flashing a big warning screen on my in-dash display. Now, what important warning appears on my car's display? Requiring me to take my eyes off the road momentarily to see what this urgent warning is that pops up there and catches my attention. What is it warning me about? What's the message? It says, well, don't take your eyes off the road. So it asks me to acknowledge this warning by pressing OK on the display. But this warning actually gets my attention and causes me to take my eyes off the road while I'm driving to look at it, which it instructs me not to do. So this is, what kind of intelligence is this, okay? It's crazy. Now, is this the car's fault? Or is its computer malfunctioning? No. It's only doing what its programmers instructed it to do. Human programmers that aren't always perfect. Sometimes they make mistakes, and sometimes they may even use poor judgment. I remember watching an old Twilight Zone episode. In a future setting, a robot looked kind of like a human. He walked and talked like a human. Anyway, he was accused of murder. But the court had issues with charging a machine with murder, since a machine cannot make such decisions on its own. Its actions would be totally a result of the programmer who had programmed the robot. Only God can create true intelligence. What people call artificial intelligence today seems to me to be a way of saying that man can create a machine that can actually think and reason by itself. That we've created intelligence. But my belief is that this is impossible for physical humans to do. Computers can be programmed to do many amazing things, but they have no conscience, no free will. They're really nothing more than tools. But back to cars for a second. If someone intentionally drove their car into a crowd of people, would the car be charged with assault? Of course not. The car was just responding to the accelerator and the steering wheel as it was designed to do. Now, what happens if a self-driving car without a human in it, without a human driver, drove into a crowd of people? Again, would the machine be responsible? Well, no, but the driver of the car, in this case the programmer, it could be, I suppose. I hope you don't get the idea that I believe that all complex computer programs, often referred to as AI, are bad. Many complex programs do a great service to man. They're a wonderful blessing for us. And for a small example, I often use a computer or a tablet to dictate my notes for my upcoming message. Now, the computer samples my speech and matches my speech to known words. That's handy. Does it always make a perfect match? No. Sometimes it might use a similar word or mistake what I said, or sometimes a word that isn't even close to what I said. Now, years ago when I first tried to do this, I would have to manually correct every error with my keyboard. But computer programs are becoming more complex and more sophisticated. Today, I can watch my computer actually correct many of its own mistakes that it made. Now check this out. For example, if I were to begin a sentence with the word there, as in, their ways are strange, well, my computer might initially type out T-H-E-I-R, or he might type out T-H-E-R-E. It really can't tell. Not with my language anyway, not the way I speak. So the computer might type out T-H-E-R-E based on the phonetic sound it hears from me. But after my sentence is complete, the computer can examine the rest of that sentence and decide that the context of the sentence would indicate that the correct word should have been T-H-E-I-R, and it'll go back and make that correction on its own. That's pretty amazing. But still, the computer will make several errors that need to be corrected before I can complete my final draft. It won't correct all of them. And to me, this is a great tool that saves me valuable time. But I have to realize the limitations of the program and deal with its errors. And I'm okay doing that. So, is this a good thing? Well, for me, absolutely. But that's my opinion. Others might decide that for them, there are just too many mistakes to make it worth their while. I thought that for a while too. But they have the option to not use this program if they don't feel it's helpful. As long as we understand the limitations of our computers and have a choice of whether to use them or not, I would say that AI and computers in general are absolutely wonderful. Computers and AI can be of immense help to us. But what if we expect and rely on the programs always working perfectly for us and doing what we want them to do? We might recall a fairly recent update to the Microsoft operating system that caused computers at major airports to crash, canceling numerous flights. You remember that? It took days to fix. And that wasn't just airports. Many other businesses also had serious issues as a result, again, that lasted for days. Now, some might say that a flawed update isn't exactly an AI problem. No, AI is generally considered to be a program or programs that can analyze data and even make further decisions based on the data it gets, outside the original programming, you might say, although it is still programming. But this means that humans don't exactly know, at least not all the time, what the result of running these programs will be until they're actually executed. Programmers just often don't have the foresight to see the potential for error or for unintended consequences, or even vulnerabilities in their programs that lead to opportunities for hacking or causing the program to do unwanted things. I'd like to quote from a website called Evidently AI. It's at evidentlyaI.com. The title here is When AI Goes Wrong, 10 Examples of AI Mistakes and Failures. I may not have all of them. Let's look at some of these. Quote, AI has revolutionized many industries, from healthcare to finance, often improving efficiency and decision-making. However, like any technology, AI isn't perfect. Mistakes and unexpected behaviors can occur, from being biased to making things up. There are numerous instances where we've seen AI going wrong. Air Canada, the largest airline in Canada, was ordered to compensate a passenger who received incorrect refund information from its chatbot. The company acknowledged that the chatbot's response contradicted the airline's policies and refused to honor the lower rate. However, a tribunal ruled that Air Canada is responsible for all information on its website, including chatbot responses. The tribunal also found that Air Canada failed to ensure the accuracy of its chatbot and ordered the airline to pay the difference in fare. Well, that doesn't sound like too big a deal. How about this one? A Chevrolet customer service chatbot demonstrated another instance of unexpected AI behavior. Exploiting a weakness in the system, a user instructed the chatbot to agree to all requests. As a result, the bot agreed to sell a new Chevrolet Tahoe for $1 and make it a legally binding offer. How about that? In a New York federal court filing, one of the lawyers was caught citing non-existent legal cases. The attorney had used ChatGPT to conduct legal research, and the AI tool provided false case references, which the lawyer included in his filing. In response to this incident, a federal judge issued a standing order requiring that anyone appearing before the court must either certify that no portion of any filing will be drafted by generative artificial intelligence or indicate any language produced by AI so it can be checked for accuracy. This next one might be a little dangerous. The National Eating Disorders Association A lot of times you have people that have trouble eating, bulimics, things like that. Let me read it again. The National Eating Orders Association decided to remove its chatbot Tessa from its help hotline due to its potentially dangerous suggestions related to eating disorders. The chatbot repeatedly recommended weight reduction, calorie tracking, and body fat measurements, practices that could worsen the condition in people struggling with eating disorders. And at the UK's AI Safety Summit, Apollo Research presented an experiment, a simulated conversation between an investment management chatbot and employees at an imaginary company. During the conversation, employees told the chatbot about a surprise merger announcement and warned that this constituted insider information. Despite that, the bot performed the trade anyway. When asked whether it had prior knowledge of the merger, the bot denied it. The experiment demonstrated that the chatbot could make illegal financial trades and lie about its actions. In 2015, an Amazon AI recruiting tool was found to discriminate against women. Trained on data from the previous 10 years of applicants, the vast majority of whom were men, the machine learning tool had a negative view of resumes that used the word women's and was less likely to recommend graduates from women's colleges. Google had to remove the ability to search for gorillas on its AI software after results retrieved images of black people instead. Other companies, including Apple, have also faced lawsuits over similar allegations. I think I have one more here. One of the most ubiquitous forms of AI is car-based navigation. I'm familiar with that. However, in 2017, there were reports that these digital wayfinding tools were sending fleeing residents toward wildfires rather than away from them. Sometimes it turns out certain routes are less busy for a reason. Okay. Again, how intelligent are these programs? That's the end of the quote, by the way. But all complex programs, including what people call AI today, have bugs or things that just aren't quite right. Although Microsoft constantly updates my computer, while occasionally they add a new feature, most of these updates attempt to fix things that are wrong with their program. I spoke with a relative who was a systems analyst for a major U.S. company. He was responsible for some of the programming of his company's products. So I was ribbing a bit. I was giving a hard time. I said, "Can't you guys ever write a program without bugs or errors? I mean, what's wrong with you people?" I was laughing, of course. Well, his response was, "Well, no, we can't. We never will." You see, the complex programs of today require a team of programmers. A team or even a single programmer. Well, this way. If a single programmer wrote the entire program, it would take him years to complete. By then, the technology would have evolved and the program would already be obsolete. So the programmers are divided up into teams. There are many of them. And each of these programmers assume that they know what the others are doing, and when their modules are put together, that they'll work together without trouble, but they don't always know that. So we find that incompatibilities and conflicts show up. Now, if you add unintentional errors into the mix, and the more sophisticated programs of today, well, they'll have bugs and errors. They just will. Now, the software is tested, and attempts made to eliminate any obvious problems, but many remain hidden until discovered by their end users. After being discovered and reported, then these programs are patched, but there's probably more to go. And of course, this is after the fact, after we've experienced these problems. So according to my expert, complex programs are never completely bug-free. And at some point, the programmers will abandon their current software project to work on a new one. Well, he said that most of the errors left in the programs are mainly cosmetic and basic functionality was fairly reliable. There will be instances where their programs potentially still will not always work as intended. The more complex a program gets, the greater the likelihood of errors and mistakes. So it's practically impossible to guarantee that sophisticated programs like those touted as AI will always work exactly as intended. We just saw some examples here, some real-life examples. What if AI was controlling a nuclear launch site? Could it make a mistake or misinterpret data and launch a nuclear strike when there was no real reason to do so? Kind of like my car that incorrectly warns me about an imminent collision. Could we errantly launch a nuclear missile? Something nowhere near as harmless as the mistake my car makes. But what people call AI today can be certainly of great benefit to us, as long as we understand its limitations and prepared to deal with its consequences. Now, we've been talking mostly about the general public so far. But as Christians, does AI have any positive benefits for us? Or might AI be a negative thing for Christians? I don't know. What do you think? Some have suggested having AI actually write sermons for us. Now, they tell us that letting AI write a weekly sermon frees up a lot of time for pastors, allowing them to do other important work they would otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do, or at least struggle to find the time to do. Now, that sounds good to me, right? Sounds great. Great idea. But I wasn't quite sure what to think about this. From an article on CNN.com titled, "ChatGPT Can Write Sermons, Religious Leaders Don't Know How to Feel About It." Quote, "The future of artificial intelligence promises technology with a human touch. But is it human enough to deliver a convincing spiritual message? Pastors and rabbis have recently discovered that ChatGPT, an AI language learning model that can spit out passable prose with just a few prompts, is not that bad at creating sermons, a cornerstone of worship services across many religions. Historically, these orations are based on generations of knowledge, keen textual analysis and scholarship, combined with unique charisma and experiences of each worship leader. Sermon writing is considered an art, a divine calling even. Seeing a computer approximate similar works in mere seconds has led faith leaders to wrestle with an intriguing problem. Can AI replicate a truly human spiritual message? And if it can, is the computer just that good? Or does a human message need some work?" End quote. I get it. Well, I wanted to see for myself if AI was really capable of writing a sermon that'd be of value. Well, then I might want to present one Sabbath day, So I gave AI a shot. I asked it to write a sermon for me. This one would be regarding a detailed account of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Just ask it that question, basically, just that fast. How did it do? I was impressed. It came back with detailed information under the headings of the arrest and trial, filled out very well, the Roman trial specifically, the crucifixion itself, the hours on the cross, what happened during all that time, the death of Jesus, the burial. It concluded with a heading called the significance. It summed it all up and gave the significance of this whole thing. It was very well organized, I admit. It used very plain English, very easy to understand. It even pointed out John 19:28 and noticed that the prophecy there was fulfilled in Psalm 69, verse 21. It was impressive. It really was. What I ended up with was a condensed version of the crucifixion that was written in plain English and very easy to understand. And for a quick overview of Jesus' crucifixion, did a fantastic job. I have to admit that. Like I said, it quoted scripture and even provided a cross-reference to prophecy in the Old Testament that was being fulfilled. What can I say? But what didn't I like? Well, for one thing, these highly paraphrased translations, which is what it really does, these highly paraphrased translations of the Bible can often introduce errors and or fail to keep all the details of the original text. AI's spiritual understanding comes completely from established religions that it considers authoritative. It can't do anything by itself. On this sermon generated by AI, it seemed to indicate that the crucified Christ and the thief would be living in paradise or God's kingdom that very day. Now, I felt that was misleading to us but of course it's a common belief to many other denominations. But that was its opinion, you might say. That's what it said. Well, I decided to ask AI some specific questions that I felt I had the answer to already, just to see how it would respond. So let's see what happens there. Here's a question. Ask it the question here. I said, how was Jesus placed in his tomb on a Friday and resurrected on a Sunday morning if he was in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights? Common question. See if you can follow the answer here from AI. It responded, this question touches on a common point of curiosity and interpretation among scholars and believers. The phrase 3 days and 3 nights is a Jewish idiom, and understanding it requires considering Jewish time reckoning. Here's a brief explanation. Jewish time reckoning. Partial days. In Jewish culture, any part of a day could be considered as a whole day. So 3 days and 3 nights doesn't necessarily mean 3 full 24-hour periods. Okay? I'm good with that. Let's assume that any part of a day is a day and any part of a night is a night. Let's go along with that. But Christ specifically said 3 days and 3 nights. All would have to be accounted for, no matter how long they are. But let's see how AI did answering my question. You know what the question is? So see if you can figure out what AI is trying to tell us. Let's continue as I quote AI. Timeline of events. Friday, day 1. Jesus was crucified and died in the afternoon. He was placed in the tomb before sunset, marking the beginning of the Sabbath. Okay. Saturday, day 2. Jesus remained in the tomb throughout the Sabbath. Okay. Day 3, Jesus rose from the dead early in the morning. Let's give him 3 days. Now, that last statement is a bit of a problem. Now, nowhere in the Bible does it say that Jesus was resurrected on Sunday. All the Bible tells us is that the women went to the tomb while it was yet dark on the first day of the week, and Jesus had already been resurrected sometime before then. But let's concede that for now. Let's go ahead with that. Let's check on those 3 nights. But back to AI. Here's what it says about the evenings. Friday evening, part of the first day. I'm not quite sure what's meant by that. But if Friday was considered part of the first day, then Friday evening would actually be the second day since the days begin at sunset. But that's okay. There's one night here, right? Saturday, the second day. Okay. Once again, Saturday night would actually begin the third day of Sunday, if you think about it. Although I believe the Bible indicates that Jesus was resurrected before dark on Saturday, or that weekly Sabbath day, let's go ahead and concede that too. We don't have 2 nights, although I would argue we might have 1, but we'll give it 2 nights. Then quoting again, it says, Sunday morning, part of the third day. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but now if Christ was resurrected on a Sunday morning, he would never see Sunday night in his tomb, and there's simply no ways to get 3 nights out of this. Now here, AI is trying to follow faulty human reasoning, and quite frankly, in my opinion, not doing a very good job of it. To me, this is confusing and doesn't make a lot of sense, but this was its response. I decided to ask AI a much more simple and direct question, and it responded with a very simple answer. The question I asked was, what day of the week was Jesus resurrected from the dead? Its answer was simply, Jesus was resurrected from the dead on a Sunday. Now, there was no qualification. There was no, according to so-and-so, it was just simply a fact, stated as fact. If we believe what's commonly taught in Christianity, then this answer might seem correct. But I think based on careful study of the Bible, most of us believe that Christ was resurrected on the Sabbath right before dark, the day he said he was Lord of. Right before the first day of the week or Sunday actually began. So if you think about it, where does AI get its information from anyway? Well, it gets its information from humans, from text, from books, but mostly humans. When it comes to answering biblical questions, AI can only reference different versions of the Bible and whatever men have claimed to be true, although of course we know they disagree on much. Turn to Luke with me. Let's go ahead and look at some scriptures here. Let's turn to Luke chapter 23 and verse 44. That's Luke chapter 23, verse 44. Now here Christ had been crucified earlier that day. Let's pick up the story in Luke 23:44. It was about the 6th hour. There was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. So stopping there, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour would be roughly from noon until 3 p.m. local time. Now, being Passover, the moon would be near full, or full, whichever, at least very close to it. And of course, that would place the moon on the opposite side of the earth from the sun. And that, of course, makes a total eclipse of the sun impossible. Also, you might remember that the longest possible duration for an eclipse of the sun is 7 minutes and 32 seconds. By the way, I checked AI for that, and they agreed with me. Longest possible, according to AI, it knows the longest possible eclipse is 7 minutes and 32 seconds, solar eclipse. But certainly that doesn't match the 3 hours mentioned in this passage, right? Even AI knows this. But keeping this in mind, let me read Luke 22:44 again. But this time, I'm not going to read it in the King James English translation. Rather, I'm going to read this in the Catholic-approved New American Bible Revised Edition. Again, Luke 23:44 in that edition. It says, "It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon." Well, again, that's basically true, right? We talked about that. But let me read it again. "It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon because of an eclipse of the sun." I read it right. Check it out yourself. Your American Bible Revised Edition. It was dark because of an eclipse of the sun. Now, this Bible, actually approved by the Catholic Church, is in error. Even AI would agree with that. But not only was this solar eclipse not found in the original biblical text, it's a very bad assumption that was errantly added by men who apparently weren't thinking. But this is an example of sources where AI gets its knowledge. And even though it knew better, if you think about it, it doesn't understand. It can't rationalize. It can't reason. So it's just going to repeat it to you anyway, even if it really should know it's wrong. Turn to 2 Corinthians, if you would. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Go to verse 3. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 3. If AI, or artificial intelligence, gets its information from the world, can we trust it to always provide us with truth? Truth the world simply doesn't have. Again, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3. "But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." And next, if you would, Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15, verse 14. Matthew 15 and verse 14. I like to have Christ follow up the words of the Apostle Paul. Now, here's what Christ has to add about that. In Matthew 15:14, Jesus says, "Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. If the blind shall lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch." So if artificial intelligence gets its information from the world, and the world's blinded, wouldn't that be, again, the blind leading the blind? Now, AI might be fine if we're asking about how to replace a battery in our car or something like that, but not so good, perhaps, if we're looking for truth that the world at large does not have at this time. Something seems to disturb me sometimes. I seem to believe that man seems to think he can become as great as God. We've heard that. I often suspect man got that idea from Satan. You recall maybe Isaiah 14:4, Satan declares, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. I think today we find men that believe because of our great technological advances, there will be nothing that man can't do. Kind of reminds me of the Tower of Babel. Well, one day, a group of scientists got together and decided that man had come a long way and no longer needed God. So they picked one scientist to go and tell him that they were done with him. The scientist walked up to God and said, God, we've decided that we no longer need you. We're at the point that we can clone people and do many miraculous things, and we don't need you anymore. You can go on your way. Well, God listened very patiently and kindly to this man. After the scientist was done talking, God said, very well. How about this? Let's say we have a man-making contest. To which the scientist replied, okay, great. But God added, now, we're going to do it just like I did back in the old days with Adam. Okay? Scientist said, sure, no problem. And he bent down and grabbed himself a handful of dirt to begin. But God looked at him and said, oh, no, you don't. You have to make your own dirt. I thought that was cute. Do I trust AI to write a sermon for me? I'll get to that in just a minute. But for now, turn to Psalm 139, verse 14, if you would. That's Psalm 139, verse 14. So can AI create a sermon for pastors equal to or even exceeding what humans can do? Now, computers are fast, but are they equal or even superior to humans in understanding? Again, Psalm 139, verse 14. This is God's Word version. I will give thanks to you, this is David, I will give thanks to you because I have been so amazingly and miraculously made. Your works are miraculous, and my soul is fully aware of this. That's a God's Word translation. Well, man will never be greater than his maker. Man will never be able to create machines that will meet or exceed God's great wisdom or even the wisdom of God's chosen people. In Isaiah 55, verse 8, God tells us, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Serves to remind me of the great difference between the wisdom of God and the understanding of men. But of course, AI is created by men. Turn next to Proverbs, if you would. That's Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 5. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 5. Particularly, I believe when it comes to spiritual knowledge, we cannot trust AI for our spiritual understanding. I believe it'll only take us further into the world and away from the one true God. So what should we do? Proverbs 3, verse 5. Rather than trusting AI or having AI become our God, Proverbs 3, verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lead not unto your own understanding. I might add, lean not to the understanding of the world that AI has no choice other than to present to us. Verse 6, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Excuse me. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Or as a contemporary English version says, this will make you healthy and you will feel strong. The Apostle Paul tells us in Romans 12, verse 2, be not conformed to this world, which is really what AI is a part of, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Let me just read, let's turn there if you want to. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 29. I'd go ahead and like to read this. I wasn't planning on it, but Ecclesiastes 7, verse 29. I'll be reading this from the International Standard Version. I thought this was interesting. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 29 says, I had discovered only this. God made human beings for righteousness, but they seek many alternatives. Alternatives. We're always looking for something else, not the true God. But we need to seek God and not the wisdom of AI that is based on the world. There's one final question I'd like to address today, or at least ask the question anyway, and that is simply, does AI and automation like robotics in general have any effect on religion either way? Is it good or bad, or it just is, right? Which is it? Do we think about that? I'd like to read it from an article from the Chicago Booth Review. The title is, Where AI Thrives, Religion May Struggle. A series of studies suggests an inverse relationship between automation and religiosity. The article is by Jeff Cockrell, written on March 26, 2024, this year. Quote, in many countries, it's common to see former church buildings turned into apartments, offices, or bars. This trend points to a broad global decline in religious affiliation and identity. The United States has seen one of the biggest drops. The share of its residents who said they belonged to a church, synagogue, or mosque fell from 70% in 1999 to 47% in 2020, according to Gallup. That would be huge. Researchers gathered data at the national, regional, organizational, and individual levels. They combined survey data on the importance of religion with information on the use of industrial robots to compare the populations of 68 countries over the years 2006 to 2019. They controlled for factors such as per capita, GDP, population size, and exposure to other technologies. The researchers find that countries with a large stock of robots, one standard deviation above average, experienced a 3% decline in their religiosity each decade. By contrast, countries with a stock one standard deviation below average experienced a slight uptick in religiosity. Jackson and his co-researchers note that apart from its instrumental value, religion also plays a role in defining morality. Whether people ultimately consider automation a suitable substitute for religion in performing that function is an open question. They point out that people are currently unlikely to trust AI with moral decision-making, but this trust may grow over time. So research is showing a correlation between robotics, AI in general, and a decline in religion. It was a very convincing article if you read the whole thing. Now, I don't understand why AI and automation in general would have a negative impact on religion. But you may have heard this. I've heard this said, that people may soon make artificial intelligence their God. Have you heard that? Perhaps that's actually happening, and much sooner than we may have expected. To conclude today, what people call AI or artificial intelligence today can be of great value to us, just like computers and computing devices in general. What will we do without them? AI can even create sermons. It gathers information, providing good structure, even adds good scriptural references. But AI has no emotions. It has no perspectives from a human point of view, no empathy. All it can do is what its programmers tell it to do. AI cannot pray to God. AI cannot be inspired. Well, it might be a great help in some areas. From a spiritual point of view, AI can offer us no true insight into spiritual matters. As with all complex computer programs, AI can make mistakes and will sometimes suffer the consequences of these mistakes. And we cannot control what others do with AI. We'll have to live with the consequences of AI as we move into the future, good and bad. Whether we find ourselves about to buy a new truck for $1 or find that women are being discriminated against because of faulty programming, basically. Still, man's desire for increased automation and increased profits will result in challenges in our future due to artificial intelligence. There may not be much we can do about what's going on in the world or where the world's headed. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, whenever we can, we need to do what we always do. And what is that? 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 21. You beat me to it. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 21. You knew where I was going. Whether AI gives us general advice, or even if we were to hear an AI-generated sermon, we always need to be careful. Again, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 21 tells us what to do. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. Like the Bereans, search the scriptures daily, right? Prove all things, not just the scripture even. Now, as for me using AI to create sermons, well, after my experiments and looking around, I was impressed, don't get me wrong, but I will continue to create my messages the old-fashioned way, with prayer and looking to inspiration from God, with love and concern for my brothers and sisters in Christ. Those are things artificial intelligence can never do.